When a billionaire father sees a humble waitress hold his disabled son with pure love, he never expects that moment to change both their lives forever. The small-town diner sat quietly at the corner of a dusty street. Its windows were always a little foggy, its neon sign flickering weakly at night. But for some reason, people still came. Maybe it was the smell of fresh coffee or the warm pancakes that reminded them of home. Or maybe it was because of Emily. She wasn't famous or rich. She didn't wear fancy clothes or drive a nice car. But she had something special, a kind heart that shined even on her worst days. Emily was 28 years old, and life had not been easy for her. She had started working at the diner when she was just 20, right after giving birth to her daughter, Lily. The baby's father had vanished before Lily was born, leaving Emily alone to face the world. She lived in a small rented house with peeling paint and broken stairs, but she called it home. Her mother, who used to be strong and full of energy, was now weak and mostly bedridden after a stroke. Emily took care of both her daughter and her mother. There were nights when she didn't sleep at all, taking care of her mother at night and then heading into the diner before sunrise. Still, she'd never let the customers see her sadness. She would smile, take their orders, refill their coffee, and even remember what their favorite meals were. Old men who came every morning called her Sunshine. The local kids who ran in for milkshakes after school said she had magic hands because her milkshakes were the best in town. But no one knew what Emily went through when the lights of the diner went off. She would walk home, exhausted, with aching feet, only to begin her second shift helping her daughter with homework, feeding her mother, washing clothes, fixing anything that broke in the house. There were times when she didn't have enough money for both food and medicine. So she chose medicine for her mother and made do with leftovers for herself. Lily never knew hunger because Emily always found a way. She sewed clothes at night for neighbors to earn extra money. Sometimes she cleaned houses on her day off, though that day was rare. Life was tough, but Emily had learned to survive with quiet strength. She had no time for dreams. Her only dream was to keep Lily healthy, happy, and safe. One cold afternoon in early winter, the diner was quieter than usual. Snow had started falling outside, and most people preferred to stay in. Emily was wiping down the counter when the bell above the door rang softly. She looked up and saw a tall man walk in, holding the handles of a wheelchair. In the chair sat a little boy, around 6 or 7 years old. He had large brown eyes, thin arms, and legs that didn't move. A soft blanket was wrapped around him. The man looked tired but serious. He glanced around and then guided the wheelchair to a corner booth. Emily walked over with a smile. "Hi there," she said gently, speaking to the little boy. "What? Would you like some hot chocolate?" The boy looked at her, but didn't speak. He just blinked slowly and nodded. The man nodded too, but said very little. Emily noticed how carefully the man wiped the boy's hands and adjusted his scarf. She could feel the love there, even if the man didn't show it in words. Something about them pulled at her heart. She brought the hot chocolate and a menu, and when the boy's small hand couldn't hold the cup, she gently helped him. She knelt beside him and said softly, "My name's Emily. What's yours?" The boy whispered, "Ethan." Emily smiled. "That's a strong name. I like it." For the next 20 minutes, she kept checking on them, bringing warm food, adjusting the boy's chair when he shifted uncomfortably, and even telling him a funny story about a customer who spilled coffee on his lap last week. Ethan giggled quietly, and Emily saw a small smile break on the father's face. But then something happened. Ethan began to shake. His hands trembled, his eyes filled with fear, and he started breathing fast. It looked like a panic attack. Man jumped up, clearly trying to calm him, but his hands were shaking too. He whispered, "It's okay, Ethan. Breathe. I'm here." Without thinking, Emily walked over, bent down, and gently picked Ethan up in her arms. The father looked shocked. No one usually touched his son without asking. But before he could stop her, something happened. Ethan, who had been panicking just moments before, buried his face into Emily's shoulder and calmed down. His breathing slowed, his small body relaxed, and he clung to her like he had known her forever. Emily held him gently, swaying slightly like a mother rocking her baby. She whispered soothing words into his ear, and for a long time no one said anything. The man just stood there, watching. His name was Daniel Carter, but Emily didn't know that yet. She had no idea he was one of the richest men in the state, owner of several tech companies and featured in business magazines. To her, he was just a tired father with a scared child. She was just a waitress with a kind heart. After a while, Ethan fell asleep in her arms. Daniel gently helped transfer him back to the wheelchair. Emily touched Ethan's head softly and smiled. "He's a sweet boy." Daniel finally spoke. "He doesn't trust people easily." Emily shrugged. "Sometimes all we need is someone to hold us without asking why." Daniel nodded slowly, staring at her with curious eyes. He had met powerful people, doctors, therapists, investors, but never someone like Emily. She didn't ask about his money, didn't judge his son, and didn't hesitate to help. She treated Ethan like he mattered, not like he was broken. They paid and left shortly after. Emily returned to wiping down tables, but her heart was full. Something about that boy stayed with her. She hoped he would come back. She didn't know that he wouldn't, that this one moment would change everything in her life. Back in his hotel that night, Daniel couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about the way Emily held Ethan, the gentleness in her eyes, and the fact that Ethan hadn't cried all day after that. He had never seen his son calm down so fast with a stranger. He searched the diner online, wondering who Emily really was. There was no social media profile, no fame, no big background, just a simple woman with quiet strength. Emily, meanwhile, was home tucking Lily into bed. Her back ached, her feet were sore, and her hands were cracked from washing dishes. But as she looked at her daughter's sleeping face, she felt something different. That little boy had reminded her of Lily when she was small, fragile but full of hope and the father. And there was sadness in his eyes that she understood too well. What neither of them knew was that this one small encounter, in a quiet corner of a diner, would begin something bigger than either could imagine. A billionaire had walked into her life with a silent son, and Emily had met them both with nothing but love. That moment would change all three of them forever. Snow had continued to fall lightly overnight, covering the town in a soft white blanket. Emily woke up before dawn like always. She quietly tiptoed past her mother's room, where the sound of oxygen hissing through a small machine filled the silence. Her daughter Lily was curled up in bed, hugging a stuffed rabbit Emily had stitched from an old sweater. The heater was weak, and the cold had crept into the house. But Lily slept peacefully, Emily wearing 2 layers of clothes to stay warm. Left the house and made her way to the diner through the icy wind. By the time she reached the diner, her fingers were numb and her cheeks were red. She rubbed her hands together, unlocked the door, and stepped inside. The smell of old coffee and pancake syrup welcomed her. The kitchen light flickered, and the old radio by the counter crackled with static before playing soft country music. Emily smiled to herself. Another day had begun. She didn't expect anything unusual. But around noon, as the lunch rush was winding down, the bell above the door rang. Emily turned around and stopped in her tracks. The tall man from yesterday was back with his son. The boy, Ethan, sat bundled in his wheelchair, his blanket pulled up to his chin. The man Daniel looked more relaxed today, less rushed. Emily smiled. "Well, hello again." Ethan gave her a tiny smile. Daniel nodded. "He asked to come back," he said, his voice low. Emily felt her heart warm. "I'm honored," she said softly. She guided them to the same booth in the corner and brought over 2 mugs of hot chocolate, one for Ethan. "Extra marshmallows, just like the day before?" Daniel didn't order anything at first, just sat silently watching his son. Emily noticed how carefully he adjusted Ethan's seat cushion and placed the straw just right in the mug so the boy wouldn't struggle. Daniel didn't talk much, and Emily didn't push. Instead, she chatted with Ethan, asking about cartoons and what he liked to eat. He spoke in short, soft sentences, but Emily listened with full attention, nodding and laughing where needed. She didn't treat him like he was sick. She treated him like any other child, with patience and joy. Slowly, something changed in the air. Ethan giggled when Emily did a silly voice. He even reached out for her hand when she brought him pancakes shaped like stars. Daniel looked at his son, amazed. This wasn't the same anxious boy who barely spoke to strangers. Something about Emily made him feel safe. Later, Daniel finally ordered coffee and asked for a slice of apple pie. Emily brought it to him with a smile. "Best pie in town. My grandmother's recipe. Is that so?" He replied, raising an eyebrow. "You own the place?" Emily laughed. No, I just work here. Been here 8 years. Feels like home sometimes." Daniel didn't say much, but inside he was curious. He had assumed she was young, maybe a college student working part-time. But now he noticed the tiredness under her eyes, the way her hands were rough from years of work. He also noticed how she moved around the diner with quiet confidence, always watching, always helping. Ethan fell asleep after eating, his head resting sideways on a pillow Emily brought from the back room. Daniel sipped his coffee and finally asked, "How do you do it?" Emily looked at him. "Do what? Make him feel so normal?" Emily shrugged. "I don't know. Maybe because I don't see him as not normal. He's just a kid." Daniel stared at her. That answer struck something deep inside him. Most people didn't know how to act around Ethan. They either pitied him or avoided him. But not her. She saw him. Really saw him. Emily walked over to another table, letting Daniel sit in silence. He watched her as she refilled cups, brought ketchup to a couple with noisy kids, and helped a man fix his coat zipper. She didn't do it for tips or praise, she just cared. And Daniel, who lived in a world filled with money, contracts, business meetings, and fake smiles, found this simplicity most precious. When he left that day, he looked back through the diner window. Once before driving away, he'd come to the town for a business meeting nearby. He had no reason to stay. But something about that diner and Emily pulled at him. He didn't understand it fully, not yet. The next day, he came again. Emily laughed when she saw them. This is starting to look like a routine. Daniel smiled, a little embarrassed. Ethan asked again. It's time they stayed longer. Emily brought coloring books for Ethan, and even sat with him during her short break. They talked about his favorite cartoons, and she told him how Lily once thought the moon followed her around. Ethan liked that. Emily didn't mention her daughter, or her mother often. But little by little, pieces of her life slipped through. Daniel listened quietly. He asked simple questions. How old is your daughter? Does your mom live with you? How do you do everything by yourself? Emily always answered honestly but with a laugh. You just do it. When it's your family, you find a way. Daniel had millions in the bank. He owned private jets and expensive suits. Yet, here was a woman making minimum wage, surviving on tips and secondhand shoes, doing more for her family than many rich people he knew. He began noticing the little things, how Emily rubbed her shoulder when she thought no one was looking, how she counted her tips and put most of it in a small envelope before leaving, how she gave her free meal to a homeless man once and told the manager it was a kitchen. Accident. One evening, Emily told him Ethan had beautiful eyes. Daniel smiled, but said nothing. That night, for the first time in months, he found himself humming while putting Ethan to bed. Days passed, and Daniel kept coming. He didn't always talk, but he always watched. Ethan got closer to Emily each visit, even asking for her when he had a bad dream. Daniel saw his son changing, becoming more open, less anxious, even laughing out loud. And every time Emily smiled at Ethan, something in Daniel's chest felt lighter. One afternoon, Ethan held Emily's hand tightly and refused to let go. Daniel watched, stunned. His son didn't do that. But now he was holding on like she was family. Emily looked at Daniel and said softly, "He's a special kid. You're doing a great job." Daniel swallowed hard. No one had told him that. In years, on the way back to the hotel that evening, Daniel looked at Ethan and asked, "Do you like Emily?" Ethan nodded fast. "She smells like pancakes and hugs." Daniel laughed. It was the first time he had laughed that hard in months. But deep inside, something else was happening. Daniel wasn't just watching Emily for his son anymore. He had begun noticing the way her eyes lit up when she talked, the way she gave so much without expecting anything back. He found himself wanting to know her more, to help her somehow. But he didn't want to scare her off. He didn't even know if she'd be open to it. Emily, on the other hand, was starting to wonder too. Why was this man coming every day? Who was he really? He wore expensive clothes and drove a car that didn't match their small town. And though he spoke gently, there was something powerful about him, something different. One evening, after Ethan fell asleep and Daniel was sipping his coffee slowly, Emily finally asked, "What do you do for a living?" Daniel hesitated for a second, then smiled. "Tech. I build things." She nodded, not pushing further. She didn't ask how much he made or where he lived. She just said, "Must be interesting." Out. That moment surprised Daniel. Most people would have immediately asked more, but not Emily. She seemed content to know just enough. It made him like her even more. By now, the other staff at the diner had started noticing too. The tall man and his quiet son had become regulars. Some guessed he was a widower. Others whispered he might be rich. But Emily never joined the gossip. She treated him the same as she did on day one. Daniel started to feel something he hadn't felt in years: peace. He didn't have to pretend around Emily. He didn't have to protect Ethan from cold stares or uncomfortable questions. In that diner with that waitress, everything felt normal. What none of them knew was that this quiet, routine hot chocolate, coloring books, pancakes, soft smiles, was the beginning of something that would change their lives. Daniel had come to town for business, but he had found something else entirely. And Emily, who had always believed no one truly noticed her, was starting to realize that maybe, just maybe, someone finally did. Emily didn't know when it had turned into a daily habit. But Daniel and Ethan had started coming to the diner every single day. It wasn't always at the same time, and they didn't always stay long, but they never missed a visit. And each time they came, Ethan would smile the moment he saw her. Some days, he'd even stretch his hand out toward her as soon as the wheelchair rolled in. Emily would kneel next to him, hold his little fingers, and talk to him like nothing else in. The world mattered. Daniel watched her more than he meant to. He had never seen someone so calm, so natural around a child with special needs. Most people either froze up or overdid their kindness. But Emily was different. She didn't pity Ethan. She respected him. She laughed with him. She treated him like a whole person, not a broken one. That was something Daniel had been searching for without even knowing it. One afternoon, when the diner was empty, except for a quiet couple in the corner, Emily brought Ethan a small book. It had soft pages with big pictures and a story about a brave little fox who had trouble walking but saved his forest from danger. Ethan's eyes lit up. Emily read to him while Daniel sat nearby, sipping coffee. He watched her voice change with each character. How Ethan would giggle when she made the fox sound like a superhero. When the story ended, Ethan clapped. Emily smiled and handed him a crayon. "You want to draw your own ending?" she asked. Ethan nodded and bent over the paper, focusing hard. Daniel leaned closer and said softly, "Where did you find that book?" "I wrote it," Emily said, almost shyly. "Oh, for Lily, my daughter. She used to be scared of everything. I made stories to help her feel brave." Daniel was quiet for a moment. "You wrote it? It's incredible." Emily shrugged. "Something small. Nothing big. But it is big," he said, looking at her with admiration. She blushed and turned away, pretending to fix the napkin holder. Daniel noticed that she often brushed away compliments like dust on her apron. Him want to know more? Who was this woman who made the world a little brighter without even trying? That evening, as they were about to leave, Ethan held Emily's hand and said something that melted both their hearts. "Can I come tomorrow too?" Emily knelt down and kissed his forehead. "Of course, I'll be waiting." Later that night, in the hotel room, Daniel stared out the window while Ethan slept. Snow was falling softly again. He remembered when his life was quiet like this before his wife passed away. Before the media, before the weight of running an empire fell on his shoulders. Emily reminded him of a time when life was simpler, more honest. He decided to learn more about her. The next morning, After dropping Ethan off with a therapist for a session, Daniel asked his assistant to look into Emily's background, not to invade her privacy, but to understand the woman who had somehow become the center of his son's happiness. What he found made him pause. Emily had never gone to college. She'd worked part-time jobs since high school. Her father had died in a car crash when she was 17. Her mother had fallen ill 2 years later. Emily had been working 3 jobs. When she found out she was pregnant, there were no records of any support from the father of the child. Yet somehow, Emily had managed to stay clean, responsible, and strong. She had never been in trouble. She paid rent late sometimes, but she always paid. Her landlord described her as the hardest working woman I've ever seen. Daniel was stunned. She had every reason to give up, yet she hadn't. She had raised a daughter alone, cared for her mother, and still managed to smile at strangers every day. That same afternoon, he returned to the diner. Emily was wiping down the counter. When she saw him, Ethan wasn't with him. "Where's my little superhero today?" she asked. "At therapy." "I thought I'd stop by early," Daniel said. Emily offered him a cup of coffee. He took it, and they sat together at the far end of the counter. Daniel looked around, then leaned in slightly. "Can I ask you something personal?" Emily raised an eyebrow but nodded. "Why are you always so kind? You're going through so much. Most people would be angry or bitter." Emily smiled, but it was a tired smile. "Because I've seen what anger does to people. It eats them up inside. Life's hard, yes, but being bitter won't fix anything. And kindness. Kindness makes things a little softer, even if just for a moment." Daniel sat in silence, her words sinking into his heart. He realized she wasn't pretending. That light in her eyes was real. She had chosen love over pain, hope over bitterness. He couldn't stop himself from asking, "What's your dream?" Emily laughed. "Dream? I haven't had one in a long time." "Think," he insisted gently. She thought for a moment, her eyes drifting to the snow outside, I guess. "I always wanted to open a center for single moms, a place where they could leave their kids safely while they worked. Maybe offer tutoring, meals, basic help, nothing fancy, just ... a place of hope." Daniel stared at her. This woman, who barely made enough to survive, still thought about helping others. His chest tightened. "You ever tried?" he asked. Emily shook her head. "Dreams cost money. I barely make enough to keep the heater running." That night, Daniel couldn't sleep again. He kept thinking about that dream, about how many lives it could change, about how Emily deserved more than just passing tips and fake promises. He had the power to help her, but how? He began planning something quietly the next few days. Daniel continued visiting the diner with Ethan. He didn't say anything yet, but he started asking more about Emily's life. What Lily liked to study, what her mom used to be like before her illness, what Emily liked to read or watch. She didn't know why he was asking, but she answered anyway. She had started to feel safe with him too. Even if she didn't fully understand why, Ethan, meanwhile, had grown deeply attached to her. He wouldn't eat unless she brought the food. He wouldn't smile unless she told a joke. One day, when she was busy in the kitchen, he had a small panic attack. Daniel tried to calm him, but it didn't work. Emily heard the noise, ran out, and the moment she touched Ethan's arm, he relaxed. Daniel saw it happen. The bond between his son and this woman wasn't small, it was life-changing. The more time passed, the more Daniel began to admire Emily, not just for how she treated Ethan, but for who she was. Honest, real, strong. One day he asked her if she wanted to join them for a walk in the park. She hesitated at first, unsure if it was okay to blur the lines between work and friendship. But Ethan tugged her sleeve and whispered, "Please." She couldn't say no to that. They walked slowly along the snowy path. Lee pushed Ethan's wheelchair while Daniel walked beside them. They laughed, talked, and even played in the snow. Daniel watched how icily she made Ethan smile. He hadn't seen his son this happy since his wife died. And somewhere deep inside, Daniel felt something unfamiliar. Hope. Emily, too, was starting to feel something strange. A pull toward this man and his son, but she kept pushing the thought away. Rich people didn't stay. They helped for a moment, and then disappeared. She had been left before by Lily's father, by friends who promised support, and vanished. She didn't want to believe this time would be any different, but the connection was undeniable. That night, after walking them back to their car, Emily stood in the cold, watching them drive off. She placed her hands in her coat pockets and whispered to herself, "What am I getting into?" Daniel, driving back to the hotel, felt the same thing. He had entered that diner just to feed his son one cold afternoon. But what he had found was something rare, something honest, something beautiful, and deep inside. Both of them knew this wasn't just a few friendly visits anymore. Something was growing, something that could change everything. Emily's world began to shift in ways she never expected. For weeks, Daniel and Ethan's visits had been quiet, comfortable moments of friendship and simple joy. But as word spread about the billionaire's regular appearances at the small town, diner whispers and gossip started to follow her, like a shadow she couldn't shake off. It began slowly, a few curious glances from coworkers. Then strange looks from customers who wondered why a wealthy man would spend so much time with a humble waitress. Emily tried to ignore the rumors, but the weight of them pressed down harder. Every day, one afternoon as she wiped tables between customers, a fellow waitress pulled her aside. "Emily, are you serious about that Daniel Carter? People are talking. They say he's only here because of you. You sure you want to be mixed up in all that?" Emily's heart beat fast. She looked down at her hands, rough and worn from years of hard work. "I don't know what you mean," she said softly. The waitress shrugged and walked away, leaving Emily feeling exposed and confused. At home, things weren't easier. Lily, her daughter, who once had been happy and carefree, now came home from school upset and scared. "Mom, the kids laughed at me today. They said my mom is friends with some rich man and that I'm different now," Lily whispered, tears in her eyes. Emily held her daughter tight. "Ignore them, sweetheart. They don't know us." But the damage was done. At school, Lily faced bullying she had never experienced before. Emily's heart broke every time Lily cried, or refused to, go to class. She wanted to protect her daughter from the harsh world, but she felt powerless. Meanwhile, Daniel was doing everything he could to help without pushing. He sent kind notes to Lily's school to ask teachers to watch out for her. He tried to keep his business out of the public eye, but news traveled fast. Some journalists caught wind of his visits to the diner and began speculating wildly about his relationship with Emily. Daniel also offered Emily help quietly. One day, he left an envelope with her manager a large sum of money to cover her overdue rent and bills. Emily found it after her shift. At first, she thought it was a mistake. She didn't want charity. She wanted to stand on her own feet. But when she read the note attached, written in neat handwriting, said, "For you and your family, with respect and admiration," tears filled her eyes. She hid the envelope in a drawer, unsure if she would ever use it. Pride and fear battled inside her. If she accepted Daniel's help, would she lose the little independence she had? Would people think she was only lucky because of him? One evening, Daniel invited Emily to a small cafe, away from the diner and the gossip. He wanted to talk privately. Emily was nervous but curious. She arrived, she saw the warmth in his eyes and felt a strange calm. "I know this has been hard for you," Daniel began. "For Lily, too. I want to help, but only if you want it." Emily shook her head. "I don't want to be a charity case." Daniel smiled gently. "It's not charity, it's partnership. I see your strength. I see how much you care. You're amazing." For the first time, Emily allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she didn't have to do everything alone. But the outside world was not so kind. Rumors turned into headlines. The local paper ran a story titled "Billionaire" and "Waitress," a strange friendship, or something more. Photos of Daniel's car parked outside Emily's home circulated online. Some people admired their bond, others judged it. Emily began to receive messages on social media, some supportive, many cruel. The pressure was unbearable. Distanced themselves. A few customers stopped coming to the diner. Emily felt isolated, At home, her mother's health worsened. Emily spent sleepless nights in the hospital, juggling bills and fear. Daniel visited often, quietly supporting her. Family. He met Lily and her mother, not as a rich stranger, but as a gentle man who cared deeply. One day, Ethan's condition took a sudden turn for the worse. He had a dangerous infection that landed him in the hospital's intensive care unit. Was frantic, but Emily stayed by his side, offering quiet strength. Her hands, which once trembled with exhaustion, now steadied those around her. It was in that hospital room, mid beeping machines and whispered prayers, that Daniel realized something powerful. Emily was more than a waitress or a struggling single mom. She was a warrior, the kind of person who didn't give up, no matter how hard life pushed. After Ethan recovered, Daniel made a decision. He wanted to do more than just visit. He wanted to change both their lives and the lives of people like Emily and Lily. One afternoon, he sat Emily down and said, "I want to help you build that center you dreamed about. For single moms, for families like yours, we can make it real." Emily stared, speechless. Could this really be happening? Was her dream finally coming true? But fear crept in. What will people say? What if I can't do it? Daniel took her hand. "You're not alone. We'll do it together." Tears filled Emily's eyes. For so long, she had carried the world on her shoulders. Now, someone was offering to share the load. Still, the road ahead wouldn't be easy. Emily had to navigate her pride, the judgment of others, and her own doubts. Daniel had to learn how. To be vulnerable, to trust again. Together, they faced the storm knowing that life could change forever. But only if they dared to step into the unknown. And so, their journey continued, with hope shining brighter than ever before. On a cold and rainy evening, the town was quiet, except for the soft tapping of raindrops against the diner's windows. Inside, Emily was finishing her shift, her feet sore and her body tired. She looked forward to going home, wrapping Lily in warm blankets, and finally resting. But something was about to happen that would change everything. Earlier that day, Ethan had been restless. The usual comfort of the diner and Emily's presence hadn't been enough to calm him. When Daniel tried to soothe him, Ethan grew more upset, his small hands trembling and eyes filled with tears. The boy was overwhelmed, scared, missing the one person who made him feel safe. Driven by that longing, Ethan had quietly asked the driver to take him back to the diner, back to Emily. It was a brave and risky move for a little boy who depended on others for everything. When he arrived, the rain was coming down hard and the streets were slippery. But Ethan's determination was stronger than the storm. Emily was wiping down the counter when she heard a soft knock on the door. She opened it and saw Ethan sitting in his wheelchair, shivering and soaked. Without hesitation, she scooped him into her arms, wrapping him tightly in her jacket. His small body was trembling, but as soon as he was in her arms, his breathing began to slow and his eyes closed. With relief, Daniel arrived minutes later, his face pale with worry. He had been frantic when he realized Ethan was missing and rushed to find him. Seeing Ethan safe in Emily's arms brought tears to his eyes. He thanked her quietly, knowing words couldn't express his gratitude. That night, something inside Emily shifted, holding Ethan, feeling the trust he placed in her. She understood she was more than just a waitress or caretaker. She was family to him. And that bond gave her strength she never knew she had. Over the next few weeks, Daniel and Emily's relationship deepened. They spent more time together, not just in the diner, but walking through parks, visiting libraries, and sometimes just sitting quietly watching the sunset. Daniel shared stories of his late wife, the struggles of raising Ethan alone, and his fears for the future. Emily opened up about her hopes and worries, her dreams for Lily and her mother. Together, they dreamed of a better life, not just for themselves, but for others who faced hardship. Daniel began making plans to fund the center Emily had dreamed, a place where single mothers could find support, education, and hope. Emily started organizing community meetings, gathering other women who shared similar struggles. The idea was no longer just a wish, it was becoming real. Lily, once shy and withdrawn, began to smile again. She saw the kindness between her mother and Daniel and felt safe for the first time in a long while. The bullying at school slowly stopped as parents and teachers saw the genuine care surrounding the family. Emily's mother, too, found comfort in the new friendships forming around her. Daniel arranged for better medical care and even helped install equipment in their home to make daily life easier. A small house, once filled with worry and exhaustion, was slowly becoming a place of peace. One afternoon, Daniel surprised Emily with a small gift, a simple locket with a picture of Ethan and Lily inside. "For family," he said softly. Emily held it close, tears streaming down her face. She had never imagined this kind of happiness could find her, but the journey wasn't without challenges. There were moments of doubt when Emily questioned if she deserved this new life, when old fears crept in, whispering that she would be left alone again. Daniel struggled with balancing his business and personal life, afraid that his world might fall apart if he let his guard down too much. Yet, through every challenge, they leaned on each other. Their love grew not just from passion, but from deep respect, understanding, and shared strength. The center opened its doors months later. It was a modest building, but filled with laughter, learning, and hope. Women who once felt forgotten now had a place to call home. Children played in safe rooms while their mothers attended classes or job training. Emily stood at the entrance. On opening day, watching faces light up with possibilities, Daniel stood beside her, proud and hopeful. Together, they had turned a simple act of kindness into a powerful force for good. Looking back, it was impossible to imagine that everything started with a chance meeting in a small diner, a billionaire father watching a waitress hold his disabled son, a moment of trust that blossomed into a family, a dream, and a new beginning. Emily, Daniel, Ethan, and Lily had found more than friendship. They had found love, hope, and a future they never thought possible. And they knew that no matter what challenges came next, they would face them together, stronger than ever before.